do that. Almost two words, just like you'll register.
We're live.
Then you have.
Welcome,
It's like your
everyone.
account, but it goes every time.
Because not only are they not, they're not paying the higher. Right?
We are live from Floyd Hill.
That was
Hi. It is Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. I'd like to call this Board of Education study session to order. It is 5:30 p.m.
Flanagan.
Here.
Haig. Here. King.
Here.
McHugh. Say that again.
Oh, there she is.
Say it again.
McHugh?
Here.
Here.
I'd like to move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Flanagan.
Yes.
Haig. Yes. King.
Yes.
McHugh.
Here. Yes. Something.
Yes. Superintendent update.
Superintendent update, the board has some different things here. That way I have a few other things to add to that. One, starting off with our ICE protocols. I think I've shared that with you before, and shared it with the buildings that way too. Just the key thing to remember here are, if ICE comes to one of our buildings and wants to talk to someone, come in, they have to have a warrant. It's a judicial warrant, not an administrative warrant. Sort of saying that right?
Yes.
A judicial warrant, not an administrative warrant. Talked to Sheriff Harris about this. Also talked to Sergeant Busick at the Idaho Springs Police Department as well. They would get the warrant for us, bring it in, have myself or someone contact our attorney to make sure it is a valid warrant. That way, before ICE will come into the building. That way we would also, at the same time as we're getting the warrant, contact parents about this of the student, let them know what's going on. I'm not sure if there's a right answer, or I know there's a wrong answer. Just talking to other superintendents of school districts in our area, it's very similar to what they're doing. Some of the metro schools have a few things a little different that way. I was at a front range meeting on Friday and we talked about this with a few people I talked to. It wasn't an agenda item, but just so you kind of know, we're trying to protect our students, the families and everything like that, and giving them support and making sure that we have things set up for them after school as well.
Are you aware of any schools that have had this happen yet?
I have not heard of one school that has happened to that way. There was a rumor it was happening to a school in the metro area. That did not happen, from my understanding. That superintendent was not at the last meeting I was at, but from everything I've heard, that did not happen actually. Karen?
Have any students chosen not to attend school under the circumstances?
I think the first day or two, we did have a family or two possibly, and that's rumored. I don't know that as a fact either,
Right.
so I can't speak to that, with 100% certainty.
So how are we as a district going to handle, let's say, that's a technical truancy, right? Or if moving forward, we hear like the rumor gets out that they're here and students aren't coming to school. We're not gonna ding the kiddos.
We'll work with the family.
Okay.
I think part of a school.
I think getting that stated is pretty important.
I think a part of a school's role, and yes, we do have truancy, yes, we report truancy, sometimes I'm not
Right,
saying we don't.
Right, no, we
don't.
know, there's.
We all know
no
we
thing.
do, but I think you have to try to work with the family and, just talk to some leadership in the district. We've talked about that with all students, working with the family. What can we do for the family? That way to assist them. And it doesn't always go perfectly by any means, but I think in this situation that you brought up, we work with the family, try to figure out, what can we do here? What's gonna make this work the best? That's a valid, very good question. Anything else on ICE anyone wants to bring up? Okay. Second thing I had on the list was a marketing update. So we have ads going right now. I kind of start off, there's a process to request a tour. According to principals, since about mid-January, we've had roughly about 10 total reach outs. We haven't had that many tours, but we've had about 10 total reach outs. I want to say we probably had 5, 6 tours actually given. I think the majority of those have actually been in this building. Now I know King Murphy had several tours or some tours prior to the holiday season too.
Are they in district or?
They're actually outside of district that way. My knowledge is they're outside of district. I'm 99% sure about that. There's one, but they've looked at, and the thing that they said, or the feedback that I'm getting, yes, they may be getting marketing, but they're hearing it word of mouth. They're hearing it from someone talking about their kids there, or their kid went to Clear Creek, had a great experience, their kid went to King Murphy, had a great experience, Carlson, whatever the case is. And that word of mouth has been a real positive that way too. So I think that's something to be proud of, that the district has people talking positively. Are there people who don't talk positively? Yes, I'm sure there are, just like anything that way. But I think those are the good things. And the principals typically give the tours. There's one tour the principal was gone that day and someone else gave it, but typically the principals are giving the tours as well. So I think that's a positive. We're talking about doing a district mailer. Now, Kelly brought this up to myself and Rachel from Jacobs about a district mailer about our construction project process and getting that information out. Similar to what we talked with the county commissioners, sharing what is happening with all of our stakeholders, with everyone in the district, not only if they have kids in school, but everyone in our school district that way, and everyone in the county. So we're working on that way too. Do you want to say anything about that, Kelly, or?
No, I think, well, I said no and then talked. So yes, I do. I think what I saw was an example from Greeley 6, and they do really regular all community mailings, and obviously they have a bigger budget, bigger community, but what they try to do is reach out to the community at large to tell them about the things that the school district is doing. Really, that helps them build community around school in advance of asks for bonds. And so I took a couple of their copies and thought, as we're wrapping ours up, what a great idea to swipe, which is my favorite acronym I've shared with you, is STEAL with integrity, pride, and enthusiasm. And found a great copy that they made that really did highlight all of the work that was done and how successful it was in Greeley to send that out. And so thought I would take advantage of Jacob's expertise while they were still here with us to see if they could help support something similar that we could send out to our community at large, really recognizing that when our bond passed, it's not just families of kids that were the ones that voted for it, but it was people who don't have kids, it was seniors, it was all of the rest of the people in the community who may never set foot in the building. And so that could very well be the only image they may ever see of the work that they helped us do. And so just thought that was really important thing to do and a nice way to put a bow around such a tremendous project and thank our community.
And I think the thing about getting it out to them is how do you do that and what's the best way to do that? And I think that we have to partner with our community towns, with our county, and say, here's the thing we'd like for you to push out for us. And I'm sure we could be successful at that.
And actually, Rachel and I and Aaron and Kristen just spoke this afternoon, actually about 2.5 hours ago. We talked about this again. We've had numerous conversations. So, but yeah, just getting the information out and mailing for people. There's different ways of doing it, but a mailing seems like in this situation with a brochure, the best situation. So we're working on that. I'll give you updates as we proceed along with that. Next one was a second signer. We talked about second signer here for checks based on the audit report. And we actually do have 2 signers. We're going to move those signers around somewhat. This is what I worked with Leah on before she left that way too. The second signer would have been Stacy Friedel and Michelle McNeil, but we're actually moving that to Brandy, and then we'd have another backup for that as well. We believe that actually answers the question, solves the problem much better than what we were doing it before. So we feel confident with that, and just to recognize that aspect that way. I want to make people aware of that because that's something that got brought up that we wanted to make sure we change. So I don't know if anyone has any comments on that. The next one, the homeschool program. It's been brought up a few times. Jessica and I think I mentioned this last week, we met with a parent, going to meet with another parent too. some things to talk about here with homeschooling programs. There's a variety of things, but I'm just hitting a couple here. Some parents have asked for a place to go in between classes. If they have a class at 9 and a class at 1, where can they go in between instead of traveling here and coming back? And we can have different opinions on that and what should happen and stuff. But we're I guess in my mind, we're listening to our community members about this and figuring out what's going to be best for our school district, our students, our community, our county. We're talking about the county commissioners that way, and the registration of courses. Next thing here, and I think this is probably something that I will recommend we put on an agenda item for probably for March, if not for March, for April, as a long-range planning committee. Kelly and Carrie Ann visited with someone last week that way. I can't remember what day it was. And
Someplace.
actually, Rachel and Aaron were involved with that too, Kristen, and probably somebody else too I'm forgetting right now, not intentionally. But just as we look ahead, having a process in place to really analyze our facilities, having our community involved with recognize our facilities, those needs of the facilities of the district that way. Yes, we just had a large bond referendum pass that way, but what's in store for the future across our district, from Georgetown, King Murphy, to this new school, as we call it, and to the new Carlson that way. But it's really important to have a process in place, and I worked with someone who told me one time, trust the process, have a process, trust the process, don't skip the steps, do the steps in order and go through that. And what they lined up for us, and I'll share some board notes with you, is a process that way. Do this month, this month, and just kind of going on down the line of where we're going with that and getting people from our community involved with that. Like I said, I think I guess back up a second here, this group would report to the board, just kind of what we did with the cat, and did you have a dog too or something like that? I think something like that.
We had a lot of
I
dogs.
mentioned DAG instead of dog.
Dang.
I'm not sure if DAG feels good either.
Okay, well, we have some kind of-
Everybody loves dogs.
Everybody loves dogs.
That's true, except for my wife. But anyway, so we'd have that group report to the board of what they're seeing and help us, as that we're helping you as a board make decisions. Just kind of like what we've done before, but it's the diversified group of community members. But I think we have to find the right timing for that, and when do we want to do this that way too, to get that facilities committee. This could be a short term, or it can be a long term. This can be an ongoing, it could be the same group for 20, maybe not the same people, but the group for 10, 20 years on down the road, looking at that in the future. So that's something that I'll throw in the next, probably in March, we'll throw that on the next agenda, would be my thought process. I think that's what we decided. Financial officer update, we're having some interviews for that next week, actually. So hopefully some updates for that for all of you. I'll go to Aaron with the boiler, and I got one other thing. So we have a boiler issue at King Murphy. I think you've read that in notes. We've had a boiler issue at King Murphy. I haven't been in the district that long. We had a boiler issue in the summer at King Murphy. So Aaron, you want to give a quick explanation of the boilers?
Yeah, so like Tom said, we've had boiler issues since I've started. Before that at King Murphy. We have 5 boilers all at King Murphy. One of them was replaced in the early summer when I first started, and then the 4 are all of the same age and have met the pretty much useful lifespan. So we're keeping them going. Currently, we have 3 boilers online of the 5. One has completely failed, and 1 should be back online this week, so we'll have 4 out of 5. Why we're presenting is 1 has failed, so we need to replace that boiler. I've gone out to contractors for 3 different quotes for replacing that, and we'll be taking the funding out of remaining funds for that boiler. And I plan to have that work done in early summer, as I don't want to take the system offline during the middle of
So,
I always have to ask about boilers.
Yeah, did I see Carrie have a bunch of boilers? Go ahead.
Is the failed boiler, and you guys would know the answer, is there any possibility of rebuilding this boiler?
I did ask the contractor to first price the repairing the boiler.
Not so much repair, rebuild.
Yeah, there was a $10,000, so the heat exchanger failed, which was
That's a little
basically the
different.
boiler.
Yeah,
There's a $10,000 difference between full replacement and repairing the boiler. So I think it makes the most sense to just go ahead and replace.
so now that we'll be replacing that one, you are going to have to anticipate that another one is going to fail because the other two are gonna push those other ones beyond what they can do. So we've got to line those out and know that that's happening.
Well, we'll have all 5 online, so they shouldn't be working harder than another. 3 of them will be of a older age than the original 2. I do plan on updating the system in the future and going more of a hybrid system,
With the
which
circular.
would be a little bit more energy efficient
Right.
than the 2 conventional boilers that we have.
Well, the possibility and the potential and the probability of the other 3 boilers being filled with gunk, right? If
There's
we
a high
haven't,
probability.
yeah, exactly. So they will be pushing harder
So
to catch up
along
with
with,
the other ones.
sorry, along with the boiler replacement, I had the glycol system, the entire glycol system tested
Right,
over the summer. The system has come back that there's acidic glycol within the lines.
Sure.
So those lines need to be treated, flushed, and replaced with 30% glycol to deionize water
Right.
mixture. I'm going to be doing that at the same time. The contractors haven't gotten back to me with quotes on that. I have received one quote.
it's hard for them to price out glycol a couple months out even, you know.
Well, especially because we don't know the full gallons.
Right,
amount,
yeah, sure.
Which is in the system.
That's right.
An idea based off of as-built, but
Thank you for entertaining my boiler questions.
of course.
And so I appreciate the questions on that way. I like something to do all the time about boilers. Especially boilers we're using much more high efficiency obviously. But you know, just go back to Long Range Planning Committee and to the boilers, you know. Richard from Jacobs has been a huge help with that as well. I think as we look at Long Range Planning Committee, you know, they would be interested in potentially assisting with that too. And we have Rachel until the end of March too, so looking for her support that way too. But, you know, and the final thing I have is talk about with county commissioners' budgets and funds and things like that for schools, counties, state, whatever the case is, just kind of looking at that way. You know, we'll have more discussion in March about this, I'm sure, maybe at the February board meeting as well. But just looking at where we're at, what we're going to need to do, it's quite likely there's going to be some type of reduction in some way of some sort, you know, trying to keep it as far away from kids as possible. But we have to figure out what is that amount that we need to cut. We're running at roughly 900,000, million, 800,000, somewhere in that 800,000 to 1.1 million. We're not going to get it, in my mind, we're not going to get all cut this year. But what can we do to make a dent in that, significant dent to make it better for the future over time, you know? And so that's just something to be aware of, cognizant of, unfortunately. And, you know, I think what makes it hard too, you have the governor's proposal, you have 1448, and you got the main school finance formula. What's going to happen that way? Some help us out more than others. None of them help us out as much as we need that way, but just kind of recognize that this is a point of discussion. We'll probably talk about this at the business meeting later this month and probably in March as well. So just keeping that in focus, and I'll try to share some information with you as well. And that's what I had, I do believe.
So Aaron, I think you've got our Lookout Mountain water and the solar updates. Is that right?
Hang on, which one, do you want the slideshow first?
The slideshow.
Okay.
I don't know, was the PDF printed out?
I think you need it for them.
Oh, okay.
Brooke has.
You know,
I don't know if
as
you want to-
Aaron's got to get it set here.
Am I still on?
No.
No.
Oh, no, I think that's Kristen.
No, it's
Okay.
As Aaron's getting said here, you see,
Is there-
Just
I think so.
Okay.
You ask who shows your hand up.
Yeah.
She's had her hand up for a while.
Is there something you need, Brooke?
Brooke, you have your hand up.
Maybe she's high-fiving herself
She's had
too.
fun carrying it before. It's just,
And if you are talking, you're on mute.
Do you want the clicker?
Yes, I'll come get it.
on that note, you know, as Aaron's getting this up, Aaron has spent a lot of time talking about our researching water quality, evaluating things, working with different, water experts that way. And he and I met with, two people from Lookout Mountain, met with 3 people from Lookout Mountain in December, I think it was.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, thank you. In December, just kind of talking about the quality of our water in this building specifically. So Aaron's gonna show some testing results that we had. We had the PowerPoint presentation from that. And then he'll speak for a little bit about that and then some time for questions with Lookout Mountain. So go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks, Tom. And like you said, Will and Barbara are here from Lookout Mountain Water District, who supplies our water. So I'll go through my presentation, and then if you have any questions for me and or them, I'll address them at that time. So I contacted ORC Water Quality Professionals in July. I got tasked from Mike Gass to look into our water quality with the school. At that time, I didn't have much background in what we were looking at or what the issue was, other than a few notes and just things that he had described. So I started off just with a basic test, and this basic test was rather in-depth. I can go through all of those, but I'd rather not. I tested for everything on the screen there, which I thought was a good starting point for the school and testing our quality within it. So the test date was in mid-September. We tested 4 locations within the high school, middle school, the boiler room where the water comes into the school, upper and lower drinking fountains in A wing here, and then the kitchen. We received the results back in mid-October. And there are the results. They're hard to read. But essentially, per EPA standards, all those results came in below their levels, their required levels for safe drinking water.
Below's good, right?
Below is
Okay.
good.
Low skin.
All results
One of those
below the
signs.
max.
I know. Below's not always good.
Results below the MCL, which is the max contaminant level. I'll reference that throughout. Once those results came back, Dr. Meyer and I met with Melissa English's class and the students and presented those results and findings. At that time, they had posed a question to me whether or not we tested for TT-HMS and HAA5. I butcher both of those every time I try to pronounce them, so I'm not going to. And I listed the general facts here, which are found on CDPHE's website or EPA standards. But basically, both of these contaminants are a byproduct of chlorine injection into the system. Chlorine has to be added at a certain level, and that happens at the water filtration plant. Chlorine's added to take out contaminants or different compounds that happen within the system. We get our water from a watershed, so that's runoff water coming in to the water treatment plant with organics and other different materials. And chlorine is a process of eliminating some of those. So just a little snippet I pulled from that I wanted to read through, and also I think everyone has a this sheet where the snippet came from that I suggested, or I would advise you to read through, because it's really beneficial in helping you understand what they are. But I'll read through this just real quick. If a public water system continues to exceed the drinking water maximum contaminant level of TTHM or HAA5, the system must take corrective actions. This is an important step to protect health. Corrective actions can include removing natural organic material from the water, using a different disinfectant, changing the disinfection dose or location, or flushing water in the distribution system. The system must also conduct public notice, which must include what the system is doing to address the situation and what precautions, if any, consumers should take. If the water system continues to exceed the maximum contaminant levels for TTHM or HAA5, CDPHE will order the water system to meet the regulations. The enforcement order process will provide a path back to compliance. So basically, our water provider, who's here with us tonight, can't provide us with contaminated water for an extended amount of time, and can't provide us with water that's contaminated without notifying us. So we retested for TTHMS and HAA5. The test date was December 2nd, and the test results came back December 15th. There's the posted results from the locations. TTHMS, CDPHE max contaminant level is 80 parts per million. Parts per million is the measurement in which that's tested. HAA5, CDPHE max contaminant level is 60 parts per million. All tests were below the max contaminant level for the locations tested at our school. So after we received those results, Dr. Meyer and I met with Lookout Mountain Water District. Let me catch up. So these are some notes taken from that meeting, just to give you an idea of what our school has, our water lines, our usage, stuff like that. So the service line ties into the district main approximately 4,000 feet from the treatment plant. And there's approximately 32,000 gallons of water in that pipe, a 14-inch pipe. Water usage from the district is around 75,000 gallons per day. So that water age is only about 0.4 days to the service line. There's about 11,000 gallons in the 8-inch and 10-inch pipe going from the district main up to the school building. Water usage at the school during the school year is typically 1,000 to 1,500 gallons per day, monthly average. What is down around 500 gallons per day during the summer usage. And I'm not catching up there either, too many things to do. The 4-day school week probably means water usage around 2,000 gallons per day in session days and less than 500 gallons a day during off days. Based on the above, water age will be between 7 to 11 days during the school year, but may exceed 22 days during the summer. And this is just the service line to the school. This is one reason why flushing the service line each year in late July or August, right before school starts, is highly recommended, and something that we did this year and they have done in years past. For reference, in a typical water distribution system, a water age less than 3 days is ideal, and anything over 7 days is of concern. Water age in the district main is at least 20 days by the time it reaches the end of the line at Lookout Mountain Water Reservoir, or Lookout Mountain Reservoir, even when flushing the lines. So here's some Lookout Mountain water data. This is both the TTHMS and the HA5s. Again, the max contaminant level for TTHMS is 80 parts per million. The max contaminant level for HA5 is 60 ppm. So this is showing May through November. And if you can see that, in June, well, I guess we'll go over it. The only two that are over is July and August. And again, July and August for HA5.
And that's cyclical. I mean, you're experiencing that year after year after year.
Right, we've
This,
known that,
this
you know,
isn't new.
yeah.
It isn't new. And some reasons for why those levels, and I can go back, that are,
It's the
I believe is
organics,
happening, is that in
Yeah.
certain months, we experience higher runoff. So in the springtime,
Right,
you're gonna have higher runoff into the summer, and
exactly
it
right.
kind of flows on the chart and the next chart as well. You'll see higher levels of those contaminants during those higher runoff times. And then as it gets toward the fall and into the school year, those levels kind of come down. That's because they're chlorinating less and treating less to meet the levels, the standards. That chart shows it again, just on a graph. It's in a gradual decline from April to December, as this data shows. And I think I just skipped ahead, but elevated level trends, spring and summer months when the mountain snow melts are at its highest, thus needing to treat the water with higher levels of chlorine. September and May, the snow runoff levels are lower. The contaminant levels tend to be lower as well. So El Dorado Water is who we buy our bottled water from throughout the schools. In 2023, 2024 school year, we spent $15,300, and that's district-wide. Culligan water filtration. So I did reach out to Culligan to implement or price out a reverse osmosis system. That system could lower those levels of contamination, but they are points of use systems. So we couldn't just put, there's not a one size fits all. We couldn't just put a system in the inlet of the water and treat all of the water in the school. With a reverse osmosis system, you can't use copper lines. They have to be a plastic or something other than copper. Apparently there's a reaction there that would take away everything that you're doing or trying to benefit from. So these points of use systems would be placed at anywhere you want to have filtered water. The price per unit there is $5,850. There's 5 locations that we could put them in the building if we wanted to just treat drinking fountains within this building. So that would become a rough cost, upfront cost of $30,000.
Would that include the kitchen area?
That would not include the kitchen, just drinking fountains. So the annual cost per unit a year to maintain those point of use filtration systems is $200 per unit. And on annual total maintenance in the school would be $1,000. Every 3 years, it'd be a $300 per unit cost as they need additional maintenance at that 3-year mark. My slide didn't show that, but every 3 years total maintenance cost per unit would be $1,500.
Which is less than the bottled water.
Which is currently less than the bottled water, but an ongoing cost for the lifespan of the unit. So in conclusion, our water comes from one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest watersheds in the state. And hopefully Lookout Mountain can speak a little bit more to that. We're one of the first customers on the distribution line. All results came below the CDPHE max contaminant level. Water filtration is costly, and per tested results, we would be filtering already clean water. So that's what I had. If anyone has any questions for me.
I think there's gonna
How
be
much
some
was the cost to do the testing? So like, May and August are still kind of high. Could we do bottled water for those months and then the months in between where it's actually pretty low, use our own water and maybe test on the shoulder months? I don't know how expensive the testing is.
We could test multiple times per year, and that's something that I kind of thought of, at least in the interim, as we're going through and getting those per year. I think we could trend that data. I don't have it pulled up at what it costs. Rachel, do you remember on the top of your head what that cost was? I feel like it was around $400,000 to do just the TTHMS.
400?
$4,000.
$4,000.
Like, we will never test.
No wonder we got
$4,000 for the second set of tests that we did, and maybe slightly higher for the first set of tests that we did.
Do we have any tests that we've done or that Lookout Mountain has done that are close to that? Well, we did, we saw the August numbers were high, July, August in that time. So, when you say the December numbers were low, yes, because they're always low in December. So yeah, it's, so the fixes that I'm hearing are we're flushing the line before the kids come back to school. So that's a big help because again, the water's sitting stagnant and that's what's causing a lot of the problem. Kind of an aside, but did we invite Miss English? I know that she's,
No, we did not invite her
Okay.
that way.
I do intend on
I know
presenting,
the students are all doing,
representing
house,
to
but-
Melissa English and possibly everyone during Connect. So that was my plan.
You can look up, I'll come up to you now if they wanna. Just come up and show some things.
Kelly's hand was up first and then mine.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I guess I have two questions. I mean, one, thank you, and I'm really pleased to see the results. I think my question kind of comes on the tail of Marcy's is, this is good information, the data testing, but we don't really have a lot of good information for when our kids were in school last year, because we're looking at June to November, and they're fine. But I guess what I'm really wondering is if we can see, earlier in 23 or 24, when we had kids, were we still at this below level? And the real reason I'm asking the question is, as you've probably heard, we're in a really tight fiscal position. And so is it still the prudent thing to spend $15,000 a year for El Dorado water if we do have clean water that is really just less clean when we're not here and using it? And do you understand? Are you guys picking up what I'm putting down?
Can we just run the faucets when
Right,
we're not here?
Right, I'm just kind of
That would be
wondering,
cheaper for us at this point.
if everything's looking good, do you still recommend the bottled water?
I don't think you need to use bottled water, but, that's individual choice, so I can't speak for you.
No, I'm just asking like from science
Yeah.
perspective, you don't necessarily think we need that.
With the numbers we have now, because we're below the MCLs.
And then to just kind of piggyback on that, if say we got rid of the bottled water today and then in end of April, test results came back bad, then what happens? What's sort of the course correction that Lookout Mountain does?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, that would be a real surprise for that to
April.
happen. We've instituted a bunch of changes as part of the enforcement order, and things we were already planning to do
Yeah.
and had implemented some of them already. One of the puzzling things is if we have these levels that we had before
Right,
and we implemented all these changes, they should have gone down and had some pretty unexpected results. And, one data point, anything can happen with one data point. So that's one of the reasons why May last year we said, well, instead of doing quarterly samples that, as we're required by the state, that we're gonna do monthly sampling. So we can actually see those trends more clearly, what's going on month by month, and just have more data to work with and see if it's an anomaly, you know, like, so looking back, like, you know, when we only do one sample, we had this happen, one of the quarters, like, you get one high and then two low, and, you know, if your quarterly sample was the one high, you're not really showing what the quality of the water is. So, the more data, the better, and we'll be able to respond to, higher reading if that happens. You know, again, we've done so many things to improve it. It continues to improve. Aaron put up the graph there. There's definitely trend lines going down. Well, it kept going down. I mean, we're less than half of the MCLs now. We're both TTHMs and HA5s at our compliance locations. So that is at Lookout Mountain. You know, that's with other issues in our distribution system. The tar line pipe further downhill. You guys don't actually have any of that
Right.
for the water before it goes to school. So that's not even an issue for the school. It is for all, 90% of the customers for Lookout Mountain are affected. Actually, I'd say 99%, because I think you're one of the only people who is in a section where there is no tar.
Before the tar.
Yeah, before the tar line pipes
Cool.
start. So that is a great position to be in, one of the real problems is that, short term, use more water, please, because
Yeah.
you need to turn over the water in your service line. We have no control over the service line that was put in, that was part of when the school was built, it was part of the design, it was part of the fire flow requirement, the pump station down there, the fire pump. It has to be sized to be able to provide adequate fire flow in the event of a fire. So that was sort of set by all kinds of other constraints on that. But the result is you have, 11,000 gallons of water in there that needs to get turned over. And if it doesn't, it's gonna be just as old as it, is at the school as it is down at the end of the line at Lookout Mountain. And so, more water usage would be better. And I think that was probably, I would bet that the engineers who kind of laid everything out thought there was gonna be a lot more water usage at the school.
Yep.
I'm surprised it's so low. I mean, that's really, really low.
Well, and I'm starting to see a causal relationship too. If we're encouraging everybody to not use the water, then we're not using the water. And so now
Yes.
we're contributing to the problem.
Ironically, yes, it contributed. And we've actually seen that too in our system, is that we used to have a lot of leaks and we fixed them. And the water quality got worse because it's not leaking, so we're not
Right.
pushing as much water. The same thing. I mean,
Right.
these are some of the confounding things that we've experienced as we're trying to deal with the water quality issue and make improvements to the system that they've been fighting against each other.
Thank you.
I also want to point out that where we take the compliance samples is dictated by the state. We don't get to choose it, and they have chosen absolutely the worst places in our system. They are long end, dead end laterals. So the water quality is probably going to be the worst there than any place else in the system. And that's where we are required to take the testing samples. So they're coming in at, half. We're doing pretty well.
Thank you.
And we really have taken a lot of steps. The other thing I was going to say is that when we were going through a few glitches, which actually started when we had to build a new dam, and there was just so much turmoil and organics that were happening, getting in while we were rebuilding the dam. We did have several quarters that were not good. And what we, as a district, recommended people do is they simply get a filter for drinking water, the kitchen sink or whatever. And it's as long as it's a charcoal filter, right?
Granular activated carbon, yes.
Right.
And there's a specific, I think it's SF53,
Right,
is the one that removes TTHMs and HA5s.
right. And so if you just had, an idea, as you were talking about, just having certain dedicated, give everybody a bottle, give them a permanent bottle, and have dedicated bottle filling stations like every airport and every gym in the country now has. If that would, if you're still concerned.
Thank you.
A couple of things. I'm hearing a win-win on we need to use more of our water, and maybe Aaron, you can reach out to them, but the Clear Creek Fire District is required to fill up their tanks and their trucks and all of their water things. The county and city of Idaho Springs and Georgetown all charge them to do that. So if we can offload some of our water and let them use it even for trainings and that sort of thing, I think that could be pretty great. And a great partnership to work with them on. The other thing is just in simple layman terms, if you could rattle some of the improvements so that we can speak to some of our parents when they ask us what improvements were made, and we can just say there were improvements, but can you just rattle some things?
Yeah, and I can give you a more, detailed. But so, one of the, we saw some high levels, and real quick, we usually saw high levels in our August sample. And we think that was due to sort of water temperature and things like that, which accelerate the chemical reaction that create the TTHMs and THFIs. So some of the things we did, we put in a mixing system and this is for treating sort of everybody, so not necessarily just the school, but we put in a mixer and a ventilation system at the storage tank. So the mixer makes sure that the water doesn't just sort of come in the bottom and go out the bottom, and we're mixing up all the water that's up on top and turning that over. The ventilation system will actually help. The THMs and HA5s are volatile. They will get released into the air and vent them out. So we're actually removing them as part of that process. So that was one of the first things we did. We flushed all the entire lines. It's something that hasn't been done historically, partially because the pipes are very fragile and very old, and we were very afraid to break things by opening up fire hydrants and putting that really high flow through there. However, given the water quality issue, we're like, we have no choice. We've got to start doing this, and we've got to start doing it annually, and we are doing that annually. So that continues. We are continuously flushing into Lookout Mountain Reservoir, and that's up by the Buffalo, well, I guess the old Buffalo Bill Museum, that at 20 gallons per minute to help turn over water throughout the system, and again, kind of more beneficial downstream than up here. Let's see, what else did we do?
Booster.
So we did, you actually brought a very good point up, reducing chlorine levels. So we are reducing the chlorine levels at the treatment facility, still enough to disinfect and have a residual, but then we boost it down halfway downhill at the El Rancho area at our booster pump station. So we push a little more chlorine just to maintain that residual down there. But overall, the chlorine levels are much lower throughout the system. And so, chemistry is like the higher the concentration, the more you're driving that reaction. So if we keep that chlorine concentration down, we're going to form fewer of these disinfection byproducts. And then most recently, we just did an upgrade to the pre-treatment system at the water treatment facility to try and address the issues with raw water quality during runoff. And that 1 year we had all the storms, like it was just a really wet year. The reservoir was very turbid, and that was a problem. And it's hard for us to treat with our old system. And so we've switched the chemicals, we've improved the coagulation and flocculation process, and also did some improvements on the actual sedimentation basin. So those things are all in place now. And I think we're really set up well for runoff season in 2025. And I think those are the big ones. And
Thank you.
Some other
That helps
small
a
ones.
lot. That
Yeah.
helps a lot.
So we upgraded all of our water filling stations here in this building a couple of years ago, and then almost immediately closed them off because numbers came back, and then we had to wait a couple quarters till it normalized. And anyway, knowing now what months are bad and that it's pretty cyclical and we can adapt, can we just look at the filters on those bottle filling stations and make sure that they're at the correct level to take care of the HAA5s and the
Yeah.
THMs and.
Yeah, I did want to talk
We
about
need to
that.
address the kitchen.
One, I'm not sure.
I think.
Does it? well,
Right,
I'm
the
missing-
kitchen has its own reverse osmosis system now, is that right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
that one's been taken, yeah.
Yeah, and again, Barb mentioned, it's a GAC or granular activated carbon filter. It is approved for removing THMs and HA5s, and that would be all you.
Yeah.
It is-
So
I-
maybe we don't need to look at the reverse osmosis at all.
Doesn't sound like it to me.
Maybe
Doesn't
we
sound
take
like it.
question whether or not we're keeping the water fountains, the drinking fountains online, but the bottle filling stations sound like, especially if we're replacing those filters, and that might have to happen more often.
I'm not sure that our bottle filling stations have filters now.
I think they do. The Elways?
It's not something that I've looked at. They can and they may or they may not. Some,
Okay.
one model does, one model does not.
But they're
Okay.
capable. There's-
We may not have
We'd
purchased the
have to
correct
look
one.
to see that
Oh,
they're
I
capable
see.
of it.
Okay, if we could check on that, because that seems to me like a much more economical.
But it also
Solution.
seems like we're filtering already clean water, so I'm not
Right.
sure that we even need.
Well, that's for the high
Yeah.
times, like when maybe in August, if it were to
When
come
nobody's
back,
here.
people are still, there are still some people, right? And maybe the fire department hasn't flushed out enough water, but
Like, it sounds to me like we need a massive slip and slide party.
that's exactly what I was
I mean,
thinking.
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And then again, in the handouts, CDPHE goes over it a little bit more, but you're not, both of those contaminants you're not at a direct cause of harm. It's more of over a lifetime.
Like 100 years,
They
5
don't
hours a day
specify.
of drinking
Yeah.
water.
What they say is if the levels are significantly high over a significant period of time.
Right.
And, you know, we have never met
It,
that.
it sounds to me like through your efforts and Aaron's efforts on pinpointing these specific areas that we've kind of gotten ourselves out of the red here.
So could it be something that Tom puts in the nugget, like, hey,
Hey, guess what, guys? With our partnership with Lookout,
Uh-huh.
Aaron's amazing work,
Yes.
we have
I think
we
that
have
they keep doing
pinpointed the
something like
thing.
that.
yeah, because I
Just gotta figure out how to word it so people understand, in a simple way to word, that.
I think that's where we're at, is just getting the messaging out that we have an amazing water source, we have good water quality, and that
I think part of that messaging is getting rid of the water bottles.
I do too.
I do as well.
I do too.
And also, I think that Lookout Mountain is doing monthly testing, whereas it used to be quarterly. You know, as a parent, when the water was really bad, I was like, how long have they been drinking water that was at these high levels? So.
And even then, it was internal issues.
Yeah,
Not so much from you, so.
Right, right.
And
We
that may be
have
hard
some
to
ownership.
parse, which is internal, and which is
Right.
system.
Yeah.
Because you do have a long service line.
Right, right.
So the reason why I brought up the water bottle filling stations is if your parents are still really concerned.
So that's something I will look at, and I probably should have already, but I'll look at our filling stations and whether or not they do have filters in them currently or could be upgraded.
Well, thank you, guys. I know that it's been kind of a weird deal when some of those came back, and really commend you on all of the work, and was
Very appreciative.
was unexpected to see the results. I'll be very candid. So it's exciting, and I really appreciate the effort and all of the really important points that Carrie Ann asked for that we can communicate about. It is safe, which I think we have to point those other things out, because, I drink out of a garden hose for my whole life. So, that explains some things, but I think the more we can, just tell everybody that we heard it, it was addressed, and we're in real good shape. So I really thank you for that.
Yeah, and just a couple of other comments, like all the board members live in the district
Yes.
and are
We all
also
agree.
customers of Medford.
So you want it to be good too?
So they have a vested interest in it, and the district is, it's a government entity, everything's public, like there's nothing to hide here. We share any data that anyone wants to see, and everything that we're doing, we're happy to, come to these meetings and have these
Great.
discussions.
We are really trying our best. And yes, it is a requirement that the board members have to live in the district, so. Really looking out for all of us.
For us too.
Barbara's the board president, Will is the water engineer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you for
much.
your-
Thank you.
Thanks for
Very
your time.
appreciative.
And, if you have other questions, don't hesitate to contact me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
I think as you.
That's a highlight.
Well, I think, we need to eventually talk to students, obviously, let them know we need to get the message out to parents, coordinate that. So it's still a process, yeah, it's just not happening tomorrow or next week, but we'll go through some things and try to keep.
Wait, no, we can't get rid of the water bottles now?
I think we want to talk to students and get the message out to parents.
Can you ask the students if they like the money or not?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, but anyway,
I
is that
mean, why are we
something
asking the
reasonable?
students? Why aren't we just taking them away?
I think we need to educate our students and our parents about the information that was talked about today.
Of
I think it
course,
can be done.
yes.
It can be done soon, but it's not tomorrow, you know what I mean? It's a process to do that way, but it'll
Well,
be-
yeah, educating
we
them
take
is
the
one
plastic
thing,
out?
but taking our expense out of the
Oh, I
thing could
agree,
be,
yes.
okay, gotcha. Well, I think we were crossing wires on our
We're-
conversation
No,
there.
we're good, we're good.
Solar.
Solar, thank you.
Yep, so,
Are you coming up? Is Rachel coming in? No? Okay, she's supervising.
Erin.
yes, I think Ashley controlled every amount of the presentation.
I have mine too, just because I have older eyes now and I can't see that far away.
Yep, so the board has expressed interest in at least looking into solar and the sustainability within our district as a whole. I can't answer a lot of those questions. I started to dive into some of that, but really felt the entire time that there's more of a process than just can we put solar on our roofs. Rachel had reached out to Verigy, and Rachel and I both met with Ashley from Verigy. She really answered a lot of those questions for me that I had, and I think answered a lot of questions for you all as well. With that, Ashley from Verigy.
So, thank you, Madam President and members of the board and Dr. Myers. I appreciate you allowing me the time to just come up here and chat with you. I put together more of a formal presentation to kind of help aid the conversation, but absolutely, stop me if you have any questions. I'm happy to clarify. And thanks so much to you for allowing me to be here. So,
I'm
hopefully,
not sure the clicker's gonna work.
yeah, I was looking, this is a PDF, so
Yeah.
I was just gonna
Just tell
say-
me when you want.
No problem, no problem. Great, so I always like to start out with a list of terms and definitions. I'm in the energy world and you're not, and I want to make sure that everybody has kind of a quick level set of terms and definitions before I start a presentation. And so hopefully this is helpful for you. Some things you might be hearing me say throughout the presentation is things like net metering and net billing. So net metering is a way that a grid-tied solar system actually interacts with your utility and how you are basically credited for any sort of excess power that is sent back to the grid. And so net metering would be that you are credited back at a retail rate, so exactly the cost that you paid for the kilowatts hours. And then in a net billing environment, you're actually credited but at a wholesale or at an avoided cost rate. And so very much knowing how your utility incentivizes solar or credits you back is a big part of looking at solar in a solar feasibility study. Also, we have some measurements here. So kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours are a unit of measurement over time. So how much you use over time, maybe through that day. But a kilowatt is actually that demand of power. So how much power do you need instantaneously at one given time? And you'll see on your own, residential bills, right? You have kind of a demand charge and a kilowatt hour charge. Your demand charge can be, kind of set almost month by month for an entire year because of at one time you had an event where you needed a bunch of power. The utility says, hey, at any given time, I know that you need this much power, so I have to be ready for that. So I'm going to charge you for being ready for that. And that's what that demand charge is every month, okay? Helioscope is a solar design software tool that we use in order to basically design and model a photovoltaic or PV system, solar system, to simulate energy production in that specific location with that system configuration and size. And so you might be hearing me say we could put together a helioscope for you, and that would be modeled solar arrays in your purview. ECM is a acronym that we use for energy conservation measures. So you might hear me say that throughout the presentation and energy conservation measures range from, doing things like solar, but it's also retrofitting light bulbs and changing boilers, retrofitting boilers, right? We had that conversation earlier today. So that could be an energy conservation measure too. And then an IGA or investment grade analysis is basically what is the cost of doing all of this and what is the savings or the return on investment for this type of project. So those are kind of the list of terms that you might hear me say. If you have any questions, stop me and we can revisit that. But yeah, I'd just like to kind of go over, who is Verigy? Why are we here? What can we do? Solar. We need to talk about energy first though, before we talk about solar. And so I'm just going to do a quick, quick explanation of that. And then why does it matter and what next steps could look like if we wanted to, move forward from today. You're so good at this. Thank you. Awesome. So who is Verigy? Well, we're a national energy solutions company. We are NAESCO accredited, which is the highest energy accreditation that you can get. And I always say that we're large enough to serve you, but small enough to know you, okay? So we are made up of a ton of localized companies. And so those original offices are now all merged together to be Verigy. So we definitely have some localized feels here. We've been in the industry for 34 years. If you want to skip to the next slide, here in Colorado, we have been here for about 3 or 4 years, and that's been my entire time here, helping a lot of different school districts and municipalities so far, and that number is growing continually. But we are the largest K-12 energy solutions company in the US. So we do the most business in the K-12 market, specifically in the rural market, because we know that your needs are a lot different than, let's say, anyone on the Front Range, right? And so we understand those challenges and nuances there. And then also we're completely vendor and product agnostic. So we don't sell parts. We are completely agnostic, and we want to make sure that whatever the district looks like is products that are right for them and works with already existing systems that are in your school district, okay? We do comprehensive energy and water saving solutions. So a little building model here is kind of everything that we touch, anything from engineering services all the way through implementation. So we are turnkey. Think of us as an energy general contractor, okay? Thank you. And then we have 4 pillars of value that we like to offer our clients. Our goal is to help you educate kids. That's your mission. And so we know that's your mission and we want you to do that. We want to be here to support you with that. So not only do we look at educating you as the client with energy solutions and renewable energy resources, we also like to bring the kids along for those types of educational experiences. So because of a lot of what we do is STEM related, science, technology and math and engineering, we like to, if there's an opportunity to bring the kids and engage them in any sort of, living lab of the project that we're doing, we want to do that. We also want to make sure that financially these projects are viable for you. So a lot of times we would want to make sure that your projects actually pay for themselves over time and become a budget neutral approach. We want to make sure operationally that these projects are going to be efficient and better for your maintenance teams to be able to manage and create efficiencies there. And then we want to be able to involve all stakeholders within your community and make sure that it's a win-win for the community as well. Even sometimes hiring local subcontractors is a way that we do that as well. And we also find as many grants and rebate opportunities for you as possible for these types of projects. And so, like I said, we're really good at finding money for projects. We know that school districts are always strapped for money. And so we always try to make sure that we're doing the most that we can. We have grant writing teams that actually write grants for you, rebate teams that apply for all the rebates for you and make sure that that money is, realized at the end of projects. Great, so I just talked to your ear off there, so I apologize about that, but why are we here? And so we can kind of move forward there. Well, basically, I was kind of approached by Rachel and Aaron, kind of hearing that there were maybe early discussions with possible solar interest here. And then, of course, you're wrapping up the bond, and we have, the beautiful Carlson Elementary that's done, and that's an amazing award-winning project I just saw on A4LE that you guys won some awards on that. So that's amazing. Congratulations there. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, what's next, right? And I heard some wonderful language earlier today about long-range plans and let's see, what else? Process, right? And I'm hearing these wonderful keywords. So I'm so excited to be a part of this. But yeah, what's next? There's more upgrades at different buildings that probably need to be done. And of course, we want to look at solar, right? And so how can we support, that long-range planning process with actual data, right? To make data-driven decisions. And so Verigy is here, just planting seeds for future consideration and sort of doing as much education as possible in order to make sure that we're following that process to get that data. So what can we do? So I'm going to explain to you kind of Verigy's approach to energy savings and solar feasibility in schools. And then we can kind of go into the solar portion of it, okay? Everybody following me, and do I need to slow down? Okay, perfect. So yeah, we can move forward. Okay, so what can we do? All right, so we know what we know, but we know that we don't know some things, right? So there's stuff that we don't know, and there's stuff that we know we don't know. And so that's kind of where we need to start, right? We're at sort of the beginning of the process, and we want to make data-driven decisions. We want to empower you to make data-driven decisions. And so we don't know what we don't know, right? And so moving along in the process, we like to take a 3-step approach. And the first step is to sort of do this energy profile analysis. Included in that is like your baseline utility analysis. And I'd like to have you think of that as kind of like your blood work, right? You go to the doctor, you kind of tell them like, I'm feeling a little weird and things are a little off and I'm tired. And so that blood work, once that doctor does that, right, kind of tells you, oh, your HDLs are a little high, or, your cholesterol looks a little high, right? And so that kind of helps give us, for buildings, your utility data over time, creating that baseline helps give us what that blood work looks like for your building. For an engineer, they can say, oh, you're really high here, this is off. This is not the typical, bell curve that we see in schools, or, whatever that looks like. And by also doing some on-site audits, walkthroughs, and some energy modeling, we can kind of understand how your buildings are performing just within the data, just by looking at the data. We can start identifying some inefficiencies there, like HVAC systems, if lighting needs to be done, if insulation or building envelope needs to be visited, to actually protect and save all of that energy that you're paying for and keep it inside rather than outside, right? And we can kind of come up with some general projected savings of what that looks like. The second step to the approach is construction feasibility analysis. So yeah, we can talk about all these things, but is the infrastructure there to support it, right? Can we actually make some of these changes and have your buildings ready to support that? Are there structural limitations? So I think the most vivid example for solar is, can your roofs handle it? Are your roofs new enough if you're looking at rooftop solar, right? And so those are questions that we have to ask throughout this process and we have to look into. And then also regulatory compliances. So if we do this, does that trigger more compliance, right? If we touch something in a kitchen, everything has to be brought up to code. And what does that mean, and is that affordable, right? So there's construction feasibility that we need to add into this process as well. And then what's the return on the investment? How much savings are you actually getting for it? The cost benefit calculation for you, comparing those upfront costs to what you receive over time. So if it's, more than that, if it's sustainability goals and things like that, then yes, that all plays into it as well. But I've learned that in school districts, it's usually the bottom line. And can we afford to do this, right? And you're already dealing with budget constraints, ongoing budget constraints. If you go to the next slide, then how does this all apply to solar, right? First off, I just want to look at how grid-tied solar actually works and visit that so that we can talk about that, okay? I'm actually going to go to my same slide here just so I can mirror that. Okay, so what we would be talking about is a grid-tied solar system. We wouldn't be doing off-grid, which some people call that a microgrid or a variation of a microgrid, right? We'd still need to be tied to the utility, which is Xcel utility here. And so whether that's a carport or a rooftop system or a ground mount system, obviously you have that system, you're generating electricity from the sun. You're generating DC electricity. It goes into that inverter, which then that inverter gets tied directly to the building and you use as much power as you can at that building. Any excess power gets sent back to the grid. And then however that utility is interacting with that power, however it's processing it and utilizing some sort of utility rate program, that is how you're getting benefits of any excess power sent back to the grid. You don't want to oversize systems. You don't want to actually overproduce, because even though we say we're selling it back to the grid, we only get credits. It's not cash. So you don't want to overproduce and send so much back that you're actually not getting, if you're sending too much back, you might be getting too many credits that you can't use, if that makes sense, right? So when you think about how your buildings are using energy, if we just put solar on it without doing the work of seeing how these buildings are operating and what improvements might need to be made first, if we don't sort of trim up the building, we could be oversizing a solar system, building it too large, and then once those, upgrades are made, you're actually way overproducing, and now your financials of your project are not penciling out for you, right? So there's kind of this process, right? You don't want to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe before you go on the diet, before you go on your trip to Mexico, right? You need to trim up before you actually put the wardrobe on, right? So that's kind of the thought process here. And if you want to go ahead and move forward. So again, we don't know what we don't know. Are CCSD's buildings fit for solar right now? That's a question we would need to find out, right? We need to look at. I'm sure Carlson Elementary is probably nice and trim because we just did a lot of work there, right? But there's always ongoing work to do. Is there energy savings that we could also accomplish some of the same things that we're trying to accomplish, but with more low-hanging fruit? And can that low-hanging fruit also tackle some deferred maintenance that Aaron and his team are dealing with? And can it create some of those wonderful, actual learning environments that are comfortable, well-lit, ready for our kids to do their best in, right? So that's kind of the thought process behind that. Are there any questions to that whole process? Okay, perfect. So why does it matter? I'd like to go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
So why does it matter? Well, identifying the right things to do in the right order is the process. That is what we want to do, right? And I think that I love this analogy. I use it often. The rocks, pebbles, sand, jar experiment, right? If we don't do things in the right order, we put the sand first, sand in first, and then we put the pebbles, then there's no rooms for the big rocks, right? And the sand here being the solar, okay? But if we do the big rocks first, the big pebbles first, if we look at the buildings, where can we trim? What systems do we need to do? Can we use control strategies to manage those boilers and those systems that, that are using energy? Can we get down those demand charges? Can we do all these things, then put the pebbles in and then put the sand in and sort of top off the entire energy project with that nice renewable energy? That's where it's the perfect blend of everything, and it's all working harmoniously together, and it all fits in that jar, right? I cannot stress this enough, data drives the right things decisions. And so when you take on this process, you're able to have all of that information to make the right decisions, especially in support of a long-range planning process. And so that data is going to help you make those intelligent decisions in, a long-range planning scenario where you could look at, what needs to happen first, second, third, where are we going? What are those goals? How do we get there? And so obviously all of that process can support a long-range planning process. This is always something that's near to my heart. I have 4 kiddos. I know where my heart is in working with schools. We're true partners beyond the just energy project GC world, right? We, like I said before, truly believe that kids need to be brought along for journeys whenever possible and learn in real life, real life labs, right? And so I can send out this, well, obviously you have it, but I can send out this live link. Riverbend Schools it's a little small school district in Missouri. We just did a big internship program with high school students, and they were assistant superintendents on the job that we did there. And actually they did such a good job. We hired one of the high school students after they graduated. So those are the types of situations that we really love. Here in Colorado, there is a new seal of climate literacy for kids graduating their diplomas. And that's also another opportunity where we might be able to partner if we were to continue forward and look at the district's energy profile here. So we could be one of those companies that helps them with their capstone project, right? So fun stuff there. I always like to make sure I highlight that. So recommended next steps, which is basically, if you want to go to the next slide. Basically, step 1 is to kind of do this no-cost preliminary utility analysis and a high-level solar feasibility study. Again, that's no cost. It's honestly as much as it is for you as it is us, because in full transparency, we don't want to just do audits for the rest of our lives. We want to implement projects and get to people's goals. So it's kind of our way of, kicking the tires, looking under the hood, seeing if there's actually something there that we can help with and that you need. And then of course we can do all of your utility baselining. So we take at least 12 to, usually 12 to 18 months worth of utility data, see how your buildings are performing, seeing where you're, where you're using or abusing most of your energy or water. And then come back to you with that analysis and sort of let you decide, hey, do we want to go deeper into this with an investment grade analysis, and do we need that for long range planning purposes? But at least this gives you a high level view of kind of what's going on in the district and where we feel like we could partner with Aaron and his team in maybe looking at some low hanging fruit first, right? Just kind of ideas and trimming the buildings and using what we have and maybe some enhancements or upgrades there first before we actually get down to the solar path. But yeah, so if any viable projects do exist, we'd love to help you kind of master plan that out, more of a phased approach, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, we can't do it all at once. And then, implementation of those projects at some point, based on various factors, and of course, funding. So that's kind of what I have for you today. It's not rocket science, but it's definitely, more scientific approach.
He was waiting. So you mentioned the Rome wasn't built in a day. How long is Rome being built? How long does that
Delve into the deep. Yeah. Are you talking about the sort of the analysis?
Well, yeah, kind of from what are we, if we move forward, what are we looking at as a district? Reality wise, to do the assessment and get to, let's say, to step 3.
Yeah, so the no cost analysis is about a 30 to 45 day process, depending on how quickly we can get all that utility data. Sometimes, that's a little bit more challenging, especially if school districts sometimes keep things in paper form still. So we'd have to get all of that utility data. Once that starts, it starts the clock.
And what would you do in the situation of Carlson when you don't have actual real data for a year?
Yes, absolutely. And I remember kind of help me understand what the reasoning for that is, why you don't have the data, because
We
it's
just
an
refer to
abandoned
the
building, right? And then
people
you
and,
redid it. Yeah. So that's a good question. I'd have to get back to you on that,
Okay.
how my engineer would handle that. I'm sorry, I don't have.
No, that's okay.
It's only been occupied since August.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in your presentation, you gave us about, the net metering and the net billing. Have you worked, or is there any benefit to doing battery banking too, so that we also have like a generator in the
Yeah.
downtime?
Good questions. So Excel is probably the most solar friendly utility in the state, which is great news for you because you're in Excel territory. It depends on how you use power and how you're charged for it. So there's not a real great answer for the battery question now.
Okay.
I will tell you that once the engineers look at it, sometimes they see that the battery actually isn't a great option, and then sometimes they do, and we can use what we call energy arbitration, where we're actually deploying energy at off-peak hours that you've gained from the solar production that day. And so you're deploying it at on-peak hours, so you're not being charged as much for your on-peak charging from your utility. So it just kind of depends. I did a presentation today, and I'm gonna be fully transparent. Colorado Springs Utility actually dings you for trying to do this, right? And I will tell you, while I think Excel probably will always be a solar friendly and battery, friendly utility, they have the right to change things. So you always want to make sure that you're able to be flexible with the systems that you put in, so that you're not just solely banking on the fact that it's going to be this way for the next 20 years.
So this is probably more of a Tom question, or if there were a Leo, or replacement Leo. So we know that our energy expenses are paid out of our operational costs. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to this, is because we could be using that money directly more so to the kids and to the classrooms. But I think, and Tom, I think it's possible that we could do all of this with the capital funds. And we're saving the money out of the operational funds. Sound about right?
I think you could.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can pay.
Kathleen's on here as well,
Oh,
or
gotcha.
she was at least.
Your capital, if you use it out of capital reserve, that's funded through your transfers from the general fund. So it's kind of coming from the same place. If you're asking if you would spend it out of the bond, but I don't know, I haven't been updated if you've already allocated all the bond money for projects, any underspend.
Probably getting close to taking care of that way.
Yeah, and so on the bond money, I would always just rely on the election language to see if it fits under the election language for a type of project that could run under it. So.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I'm done with this.
There's also other models too that we can look at. There's energy as a service models, there's financing models. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I apologize if I missed this, but you had mentioned earlier, your team helps with like grants and getting rebates and such. Do you have an approximate percentage of total project costs that you have found in the past to be reimbursed through grants or, you know, paid for by grants or reimbursed through rebates? You know, so if it costs us X amount, you know, you see that 20% typically is handled via grants or rebates
Or
or, you know, whatever.
incentives, yeah.
Yeah, so the grants and rebates are very specific to the energy conservation measures that you're doing. So I can't give you like a blanket, usually it's 20% or whatever that looks like. You know, also the funding, the federal and state funding looks very different right now, starting January 2025. So I'd hate to say something and that not necessarily be true for the next few years. But I will tell you that every project we've done here in Colorado, I have gotten grants funded. Rebates are usually through your utilities, so that's usually a no-brainer. And of course, lighting rebates, things like that are just a matter of, you know, applying for them and managing them. We've even received Department of Local Affairs grants for schools because in small communities, sometimes you might be seen as an emergency operations center since you have usually the largest buildings in the community. So I've gotten grants, you know, here in Colorado for 50% of the project, 50, 60% of the project. And then, you know, depending on what it is, you know, as low as 10% of the project. So it really varies.
Just wanted an idea, like.
Yeah. It really varies
Is it
on
like
the scope.
2% or is it like, you know?
Yeah. Like for lighting and mechanical, there's no grants for that. They just feel like you should be
Doing your
doing
thing.
that, right? For solar and things that the state's really trying to push, there's more grants for that. But if we're not doing solar, then I can't, you know, we can't apply for it, so.
Awesome. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Is there anything, Erin, or Rachel, that I didn't touch on that you wanted me to?
We've made it to a meeting where I don't talk.
Thank you so much for being here.
She's
Share
thrilled.
Information.
I'm so
It's great.
happy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
absolutely.
That was really great.
Appreciate your time. on this.
Good information.
No
worries.
further
Do we
discussion.
have public
No
comment?
problem, yeah. And let me know if there's any other questions that come up.
Sounds great.
Erin.
Yes.
Legislative updates. Senate Bill 25.
More
Happy school funding. It is this, how much is this one going to affect us, or could it be negative?
Well, everything is negative.
Everything.
I mean,
negative.
so everything is
Yeah.
negative. The reason I called this one out, well, there's a bunch of other
Yeah.
ones, and this has gone through the Senate process all the way. But basically, the long and short is that the School Finance Act, there isn't money to implement that. And so it's really trying to figure out, how do we do that? So part of how we do that is proposing to get rid of averaging, which is a big hit for every district in Colorado, but certainly for us as well. And so I really just put this as a placeholder to have this bigger conversation around the School Finance Act, around the changes to averaging, and bringing it to the attention of my colleagues here so that we can pay some closer attention perhaps. There's a concerted effort happening at the Capitol to require that the School Finance Act be honored, or if not, then not penalizing districts. I think the big issue right now is how this is all going to be fixed, which is, you know, how do we find more money? You know, as we've heard, the state budget is about $900 million, $1 billion in red, and so every supplemental budget request is additional cuts. And K-12 is no exception to that. In fact, on January 31st, the governor's budget director is proposing an additional $162 million coming out of K-12 funding. And so I just want to raise that up as we are starting to talk around budget and thinking about the implications that we have to deal with. I think some of the strategies that are being thought of at the Capitol is really to say, okay, well, if you can't implement 1448, the School Finance Act, in the time frame that you said, then just give districts all the money right now. Give them the 571 right now and then be done with it. That's not carrying a lot in the building. So I really do, again, just bring it up for situational awareness around the budget challenge and really what can we do to try to talk about if getting rid of averaging is the direction that the state is going to go, can we think about that over time? Because this is really going to be harmful for Colorado because we are almost entirely declining enrollment. Our district is not unique in that. I think there's a handful that have some increased enrollment. So that's why I wanted to just flag that. And that this particular bill has made it through the Senate. It is going into the House, and what they're trying to do is just fill in some of the holes. And I think trying to prevent additional cuts, but additional cuts are being proposed. We will not hear from the governor's budget and economic forecast until mid-March. So this is just on the radar that, the hits keep coming. The additional $150 million that the governor's office talked about at the end of January was at-risk student funding, which that really sucks. So the message that I have shared and that I've talked with Rachel Lee, the lobbyist for rural schools, is we understand the fiscal constraints that the state is under, but it is completely unacceptable to balance the budget on the back of third grade. And don't do that. And if you can't implement the School Finance Act, then don't. And let's go back and do the BS factor and let's at least make sure we're funded. Because you can't say you're fully funded and then cut everybody $200 million. That is all. Happy news. But then I did want to just mention the federal policy update and the concern around the governor, or not the governor, the president trying to task DOJ with looking at with ultimately the goal of shutting the United States Department of Education. That has.
Claim they already have.
That has, I mean, they might by the time we're done here tonight.
They may have.
But that obviously is shutting off a spigot to even more money. So I think, again, it's just the reality that we're in a tough financial place, and we heard from the commissioners, they're in a tough place. The state is in a tough place. The federal government is in a tough place. And there's lots of conversation around, to be quite honest, whether K-12 public education is the way we know it today is how it should be tomorrow. And it feels sort of like we're living in a very weird experiment right now. But I just encourage everybody to pay attention to these. We are members, of course, of the Rural School Alliance, and Rachel Lee is doing a great job on the lobbying front. I'm talking with her. I did share with her that if helpful, we are a rural school, but we are close to the Capitol, and we would be very willing to testify on things. So if she did need a voice from a rural district, we would be very happy to be that voice. I also said I don't think I should be that voice because I'm a confusing person in the Capitol, but I said I knew that somebody from my board would be willing to do that. So I think it's keeping your emails open for when that request comes, because I don't think it will be an if, I think it will be a when.
It's gonna be a win. And please, if it comes up, do ding us when that opportunity
100%.
arises.
Well, and because we, I don't want us to be, the water carrier for every rural
No.
school district, but in-person testimony is really impactful and we're close.
Yeah.
So we can, I think, carry some water for our friends on this,
Yes.
which is always nice. So that was my bad news update for the day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sit around in Hem Hall for a little longer.
So yeah, our priorities, I think, as a district still fall within, so you'll see this little flyer that has been
Yeah.
put together. But finance being the biggest.
To the
Yeah.
moment.
Okay.
Kathleen,
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi.
welcome.
I think we're on next for the expenditure, monthly expenses question and answer. And I'm ready to take notes, and I possibly will have to get back with you with answers since I'm kind of new at looking at these, but let me know if there's any concerns I can look up for you.
I was ill prepared thinking that we didn't have a person who would have my So I reserve the right to maybe ask them next month. if I
Okay.
may.
Fair enough.
Or send an email.
Or send an email. if
Yes.
that's okay. I'd be surprised if Marcy didn't come up with.
I just have a general question, well,
Okay.
2 questions, I guess. The first one is the BOCES. How often do we have to pay that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear your question.
BOCES, it was like 200,000. I was just curious, is that annually or?
Oh, yeah.
Biannually or?
I'd have to look at the total budget for BOCES, but I think it's higher than that, isn't it, Tom? I think you and Lisa or Leah have been looking at it, correct?
Yeah, it's either 2 times a year or 4 times a year that it's either, I want to say it's either 400 or 800.
Yeah, I was just saying this month it was 200,
Yeah, it's not a monthly, it's, I can't tell you right off.
more than once.
It's either, it might be 800,000 or it's 400.
And that,
It's a hefty number.
I feel like this one was to balance some miscalculations on their end, but I don't know.
yeah, I know we were digging in last year trying to set the 25 budget for BOCES, and it was sometimes difficult to get all the information. So I'm going to look back at Leah's notes and I'll try to get an email out on what I can see on that for now, how often it's billed and the total cost.
Okay, thank you. And just a general question, on Fund 10, we always see these, Amazon or maintenance, they have to go get a windshield repaired, which is totally fine. I understand we need supplies, we need to have windshields that aren't broken. I'm just wondering, out of these like buckets, how are we managing that we're staying under budget or within the budget? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that, and Tom, I think there's regular meetings that should have been occurring between some of the department heads and Leah to review budget to actuals as well. But Tom, if you can chime in, I'm not 100% sure.
And Kathleen, what you said is right. What Leah has done is like, out of this budget, out of this line, there's 40% of it. That's the spanner, 60% spent. She'll talk to Aaron, regularly, Steve Swartz, just the different directors and talking about things like that.
Okay.
So it's known in that line how much money is left or what percent of the money is left that way. And this time of the year, it depends because sometimes big bills in a certain line may not come up until like April. So you may be 20% right now,
Yeah.
but you're going to have 75% of it's going to be paid in April that way. So
Right.
regular meetings, yes.
And I think she had done some of that work also in prepping for getting ready for the budget, because one of the things we want to look at is if you have an overspend in one line, is that an anomaly for the year? Or is it something that we need to build in as a budget request, or can we reallocate from a different line? It's all of that digging into the budget to make sure for next year we set it appropriately.
And just in coordination with that, we've looked at one area that it's budgeted for this month, much for this year, and we know they're only gonna spend like about this much. So going into next year, we've already set that down to a much lower amount that way. And that was working with one of the directors and Leah, that one.
I have a follow-up question to the BOCES, and I have very little understanding of it, but is it, out of the money that we pay them, are we basically a pass-through for funding that gets to them?
Yes, they get federal funding and then they bill us for services.
They actually pay the people typically.
Yeah. And I don't believe the federal funding covers the actual costs, correct? Thus, we would have no billing.
Is fair is, like how much is the federal pass-through and how much is our
Yeah.
participation,
I think we can, well, just
participation.
trying to think if we can see that in the audit. I know that, the allocation is reported to CDE as to and we know how much we should be getting allocated, but I'd have to look at that for the current year.
Yeah, I know we have that, but
Yeah.
we can check on that one. Kevin
Thank
can
you.
check on that.
Just comes out of a conversation with you, but do we know what percent of BOCES is federally funded and what of just our general budget? I think most of it is BOCES, like IDEA. And just wondering what.
A good chunk of it is, I think that
Yeah.
relates to that last question.
Right,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, we'll check that out. Good question. Oh, no, that is.
Well, just
Not
kind
all
of
of
the
it, it's not all
commissioners
of it, but it's.
say that they kind of did some math to figure out what portion was federally based and
No,
how that.
no, it's a good question, and if the federal money isn't there, or less federal money, what impact does that have? I tell you right now, that's
Yeah.
a very negative impact, let's put it that way.
Right.
I can't see them getting rid of
Yes.
the IDA funds. It may be in a different way. I guess I can't say that. I want to say that, but I probably shouldn't say that.
Well, and I think if Elon Musk gets rid of this department, then are any of those dollars still coming? I don't know.
That's
And I
where
would,
it's coming
I
from.
would bet no.
Right.
Well, and what would be interesting is there's, I think, legal statutory requirements of maintenance of effort. And what happens to that when you have no funding?
Yeah, because the school districts are still required to provide services.
Right.
It's pure and simple. I mean, we can slice that any way you want, but that's still.
We're gonna bottle
a
up our
requirement
water
for
and
us.
start.
I think that puts us right into the budget work. I think.
Yeah.
You guys have been, I didn't hear any other questions and I think I already took us there, so.
I think at the next, and I kind of shared some updates that way. But, just as we are looking at things, our deficit, how are we going to address that? I think at the business meeting, we need to have that discussion. I'll try to send, or be looking at that, let's put it that way, of how much of our deficit do we need to cut versus how much we want to cut. You know what I mean? It's a balancing act there too, but we definitely need to have some reductions. And I think Leah shared with all of you, if I remember correctly, some ideas on, areas that we're reducing that we can see that aren't impacting kids directly. Everything impacts kids in some way, but less direct than others that way. So looking at some of those things. But we're looking at, I must say, $1 million, and that's, and then if you, if you think about forest funds, those don't come through, that's another $250,000. And I'm throwing a number out that's roughly close, I think. So we just have to look at that. And I think the one thing that we need to figure out is how much of that deficit do we want to attack for next school year? That's what it comes down to. And then myself, other people, Kristen, principals, working on that and finding out where can we make those shifts in spending and things like that. We have to look at that. And we've already started that. That's not something that is brand new. It's not something we haven't started yet, but we have ideas. We need to figure this out for the benefit of the district for next year, but also beyond. And I think that's the key point that way. My recommendation would not be to attack all of it this year. I think that would be good, but that wouldn't be my initial recommendation to do that. But let's look at what can we do over a time period.
I don't even think we know at this point what we can, or what we're expected to attack just yet. Like, those unknowns are still out there.
As far as
The
state
state and
funding.
federal, yeah. I mean, that federal one's a big hit.
mean, I think no matter which way we slice it, we have reductions that have to happen. It's just, in my mind, a matter of how deep they have to go. You know, because we know as we sit here today, we know what our budget looks like today. And then it's not, there's no universe where it gets better. There's only universe where it gets worse.
It's degrees of
And-
worse.
And so we have to start cutting now with a forward thinking about
Sustainability.
additional
Yeah.
cuts on top, because it's just a bleak moment for,
No, you're exactly right. And at the next business meeting, we'll try to lay some things out to where, okay, so our deficit, if we do this, our deficit next year,
Right.
it'll trend that way. If we do this, it'll trend this way. If we do this, it'll try to give you two,
That's right.
three different options to look at and see of where does that look, what does that look like that way? And those aren't nice numbers to look at, I'm gonna be honest with you. They're not pleasant to look at.
it's very young.
But I think it's something that we need to be aware of and share that information. It's not a secret, okay? It's in a meeting here, and we need to look at that and figure out what is going to work for our district that way. So,
Staff and family calendar.
I gave you information on staff and family calendar, Kristen did over the weekend or Friday or sometime like that.
Where it currently is the 16th, the 19th, right? That was what I didn't see in the folder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just looking at, yeah, exactly. So just moving it to match up with Jeffco. I've talked to you, I've talked to some people and they would say that, yes, we need to match up with theirs, and we don't have to either. We don't have to.
I don't think it really matters, but I think Warren Tech probably uses Jeffco, and we have so many kids that do that it makes sense.
I think that's where it turns for me, is the kiddos are
Thank
going
you.
to Warren Tech and, yeah.
I know in the past we've talked about it too, because we do have families in the district who have kids both places.
Right.
So lining up for those families also is nice.
And we have employees that maybe work there and their kids are there, or employees are here and their kids are there. But for me, it's all of those, but the big thing is the Warren Tech, because for our kids to either not get a spring break or miss a whole week at Warren Tech is a huge.
And I saw Warren Tech's moving to 5 days a week, so
Yeah.
to take away their spring break with that.
Right.
Yeah, here's the penalty of learning
Yeah.
faster and more. No vacation. It's like adulting right away.
Well, restaurants, I-70 and C areas prefer that we split them up, but Warren Tech's more important.
Well, and I think, I mean, there's plenty of time for us to communicate this change. We're not changing the calendar
It's not like it's for next
spring
month,
break. So I
right.
mean, I think it is good and makes sense and feels partner-ish, which I also think is important.
But Jeffco has now approved their 26, 27, and we do line up.
We
for
do
that.
line up, and we
So-
can now do 27, 28.
Yes. And did they line up with us?
They do 3 years at a time.
Oh, okay. Okay. Say, how did we miss that then? Or did they
They
make a
just
change?
put it out.
Okay.
They're super late this year.
Okay,
Trust me, I've been calling them like every other week.
thank you. No, and thank you for bringing it to our attention so that we can be as timely as possible, so. I think we can move on to policy work. Unless there's any other discussion on calendar. Did we have any other community feedback? Say,
Like I said, I've run it by our charter team and they're good.
excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, it's my job.
So, seeing no other questions or concerns? Future agenda items?
I think you just keep rolling with your updates on homeschool potentials and possibilities. I think we keep getting those.
So I think a big hurdle is the expense connected to it,
Mhm.
so.
There's also a huge expense for not having it.
Do we want to talk a little bit about, just throwing out
Yeah.
solar? Do we want to talk a little bit more about that at the business meeting or not, or?
I would love to. I'm good with talk.
I mean, what are we talking about?
We would like to have them move forward and do a,
The
To do just the evaluation of
The
like the
two
lights.
Do we need to solicit for additional companies to provide that? Because I'm assuming that, yes, it's no cost for them for this one and this one, but I'm assuming that there becomes a cost with the next one. And then are we outside of our board policy by not soliciting multiple
It
vendors
depends
to
on
do
whether
that?
or not I think we put them in the box of consultation at this point. So you need to vet that out.
Because I would assume if we do step one with them and step two with them, we can't do step three with someone else. And
Right.
so it does feel like we are circumventing a policy if we don't at least open an RFP for other vendors. I know there's billions of solar vendors in Colorado, and so I just want to make sure that we are giving equal opportunity to those companies, because I would assume we would not want to get information and then do nothing with it. I think we would
Right.
ultimately want
And
to
I think
engage.
Jacobs was probably our contact with that, they have several companies that they work with. And so maybe, we look at our procurement policy and see whether or not this fits that box.
so we'll look and see for the study in March or something like that, see where
Right.
we're at. That way. We'll have some conversation. Any comments you have at all, Aaron, on that, or that makes sense?
No additional comments, I'll reach out, I'll speak with Rachel and.
So I think we need three altogether, right?
And I know that the rec center you just did, well, not just, but they did a rooftop solar a while ago. They did not use that company. So I also know there's another local ones, or not local company, but
There's different groups out there.
there's so many options. So I do think it would behoove us to then multiple.
I think we need to keep the conversation going, I guess is my.
Yes, I think that is.
And she was suggesting more than solar, taking
It
a
was
look
more
at the lights that we have and can we save?
Energy.
Yeah.
I mean, if we are an Xcel Energy customer, which we are, they do
They
some
will come
stuff
in
for
and
us
do
for
Yes.
free from sort of an assessment. And then I think that we are not in a policy challenge. And so that might be a good place to,
But then they're tied to vendors that they get money from. I've done that one.
So
It feels
it's really a
weird.
question of whether their assessment is tying us to work with them. And that's the
right,
question.
because I mean, then are we gonna take Verigy's assessment and then go give it to Iconergy? I don't think you could do that.
We
They
can
would rather
ask.
do their, I'm sure that Iconergy would
Telling you.
rather do their own.
Right, I would think that they would want to do their.
They would.
anyway. Yeah,
I
so, I mean, I don't even know how you get a proposal and the first two steps are, here's the free work. And then you don't even know what the dollar amount would be because you don't know until you
Right.
do the free work.
Well, and I think the question that I have is, do you have to sign
yeah, that's a
something
great
that binds you to them if you
Correct.
start phase one and phase two? Are you obligated to stay with them for phase three? Because I would assume that if they showed phase one, like, you're not viable anywhere.
Right.
Okay, fine, that's great. But if then phase two is like, you are viable, then now I'm gonna start showing you product. Are we locked into them on step three? I would
This can't be
assume.
the first time that the question's been brought to them on
Right.
that front, frankly. I mean, they work with school districts and most school districts have a procurement policy. Yeah.
And who would like to sit in on agenda planning?
It's my turn.
Okay. Let's see, rock, paper, scissors, see? My beads.
No, does anybody else feel like, no?
Okay. I look forward to it. So yeah, because I know we're really, really tight. Yeah. I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. Oh, wait, no, we can't adjourn. I would like to move us to executive session.
No, we're adjourning.
And then we
going
come
into a
back?
Special session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Then I move to adjourn.
Now, second.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Haig,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McHugh.
Yes.
Yes. Now we go into a special meeting, a special meeting.
Is that at 7:30?
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
So I will tell you guys that the reason why I jumped down the car to come